Episode 4 Emotions and Awareness. The sky was covered with weightless silver-blue clouds, and the sun's rays peeked through their airy clothes. Around, as far as the eye could see, stretched a majestic plain, covered with young green grass. A harmonious composition of ancient megaliths towered in the east, their stone arms pointing upward. One could feel the power emanating from them, even a few yards away. It was everywhere, in the faintly sparkling air, in every blade of grass in the vast expanse, and in the silvery clouds lining the firmament to the very horizon. The keeper of the knowledge gathered his students and followers here. 20 men and women who once made their choice in favor of spiritual development and knowledge. However, every step along this path raised new questions. The people settled down on the grass, forming a circle, and the sage sat in the center. He had just answered another question, and after looking at the audience with his penetrating, pacifying look, was waiting for a new one, ready to satisfy their spiritual thirst. Beloved teacher, what should be done when intellectual laziness has taken root in our heads? Asked a round-faced woman. Her attentive grayish eyes shone through a pair of glasses. For example, I'm given a task to write an article, but my head is empty. How do we start the thought process? I can understand physical laziness. I get up, become active, and the process starts. But how do I overcome intellectual laziness? That is a good question, Dana, said the keeper. But to answer it, we need to figure out the reasons. Intellectual laziness most often occurs when the emotional center does not participate. So intellectual work should evoke emotions in us? Then it will be easy, and there will be no need to force yourself, the student clarified. The sage clasped his hands in a lock and intertwined his beautiful fingers. There was a short pause, during which he looked at the woman appraisingly, choosing the words that would allow her and others to grasp the very essence, to get closer to a deep understanding of the principle. You see, the teacher finally said, untwining his fingers, let us use an analogy. A person's organization can be compared to a cart, 3 horses, and a coachman who drives this cart. All the 3 horses must participate, get involved in the process, so that the cart moves. Do you know what these horses represent? He gazed questioningly at Dana, then looked at the other students in the circle to see how well and correctly they understood his words. Probably the emotional parts of all the centers, Dana suggested uncertainly. Think. What drives us? The keeper of the knowledge asked a counter-question. Generally, these are 3 different centers: instinctive, emotional, and sexual. The instinctive center is the physical needs of our body, for warmth, food, and water. We want to eat, so we take actions to satisfy this need. We go to the store, buy food, cook, and before that we get a job to earn money and enable us to buy the food. It is more or less the same with the emotional and sexual centers. They move us, make us commit certain actions, encourage us to fight laziness and inertia. Because of the sex drive, a person is ready to go to the ends of the earth for the object of his lust. And emotions give us a lot of energy to do what we like. The students who were listening attentively to the keeper of the knowledge nodded eagerly, and sparks of understanding lit up in their eyes. And now imagine that the cart is traveling on a bumpy road, the teacher continued, and a drunken coachman is driving it. The cart is our body, and the coachman is our mind. And in order not to overturn the cart, you need to use one of these horses, one of these centers. To overcome intellectual laziness, the most important thing is to use the emotional center. The sage finished his sentence and fell silent, allowing the students to digest the next portion of information. Teacher, but how do we turn it on? Dana looked into his eyes inquisitively. We cannot order ourselves to experience emotions. Yes, the keeper of the knowledge nodded. It is not easy to turn on the emotional center. For example, in monasteries, monks engage another horse, the instinctive center. Let us say an acolyte makes a vow. I will not eat until I do this and this. And then this horse starts to wake up slowly and move the cart. But the emotional center can also be turned on with the help of different images. What kind of emotion you need? Such should be the images. For example, what do you think you need to imagine to awaken compassion? The keeper asked the question, encouraging the students to think actively. After a short pause, several hands flew up, and the teacher nodded in the direction of a middle-aged woman with a neat hairstyle. For example, you can imagine that a poor old woman is starving, and she doesn't have the money to buy bread, or that animals were burned in a forest fire. Then we start feeling compassion. That is right, Christine, the keeper of the knowledge confirmed. It means that we should choose images that will evoke the emotions we need. And when these emotions appear, there will also be the power to perform an action. And you can write an article or do what you need. This is an emotional force, and it is very important for us to master this force, to learn how to wield it, because the most important thing is hidden in the emotional center, the soul of a person, his contact with God. Teacher, I have a question. Why is this happening? One of the students spoke up, a long-haired girl with thick eyelashes and a sharp chin. I have an aunt. She's not much older than me, and we used to talk a lot. I know that she reads a lot of divine literature, but one day we talked, and she said that she did not feel God, although she tried to reach him through books. Irina, you can already guess why, can you not? The keeper of the knowledge smiled. You asked me this question for a reason. Yes, your aunt is trying to know God through the intellectual center, but contact with him takes place in the emotional center. So she has learned everything about God, what he consists of, but there is no contact. What should I do? How can I help her to awaken emotions? She should pray, listen to religious chants, and dance. Then the emotions will arise, which means that contact with the Supreme Being will immediately appear. The girl gratefully bowed her head before the teacher, and meanwhile a light-eyed guy raised his hand. Can I clarify this issue? Did I understand correctly that a goal can also help? Because it is the goal that gives some kind of image, and then emotions awaken in a person? That is right, the teacher replied. Yes, there must be a goal, since the image is connected with the goal. That is, if we imagine an old woman who is starving, then we have already formed a goal, to help her. There are different goals. For example, there may be a big goal to achieve nirvana. How do we strive for it? The keeper of the knowledge again addressed the question to all the students, who listened to him with bated breath. We have to imagine, the light-eyed guy answered with a shade of question in his voice. Yes, the simplest is the image of a bodhisattva, an enlightened one, who almost reached nirvana, but gave it up to help people. That is clearer. A bodhisattva reaches a high level to help people who are suffering on earth. Compassion arises, emotions arise. There is an image, and it is already clear why we should strive for nirvana. The keeper of the knowledge looked at the young man who had asked him the question about the goal, giving him a look full of unconditional love. "Yes, I understand," the guy exclaimed, not hiding the joy of realizing the truth that gripped him. "We imagine a bodhisattva, thus shifting the abstract concept of nirvana into the language of emotions and experiencing this image emotionally." "That is right," the teacher said. "And after that, we can strive for nirvana. Abstractions such as merging with God must be experienced emotionally. And then they will become goals for us, something concrete, not abstract." For a while, a peaceful silence reigned in the circle of the speakers. Their active mental work was reflected on the faces of the students surrounding the sage. Each of them received their own experience of cognition, experienced certain insights, and moved on to new horizons of spiritual search and development. Each student knew that the keeper of the knowledge accepted them, gave them love, and helped them to come to important realizations, so no one was afraid to ask questions, talk about their problems and difficulties on their spiritual path. And then, the teacher's gaze fell on the upraised hand of a woman whose head was covered with a light yellow turban. Throughout the entire spiritual conversation, she had not uttered a word, but now she finally decided to ask the question that concerned her. "Teacher, we talked about intellectual laziness and its causes, and I want to ask about my problem." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "I am very inattentive and often forget everything. How can we understand what the root of my inattention and forgetfulness is?" The keeper of the knowledge looked at the woman, penetrating with his gaze into the very depths of her soul, touching her with the bright, sparkling power. "What do you think?" he asked with a warm smile. Feeling the touch of energy, the woman also smiled, but immediately looked away, fell silent, lost in thought for a while. "Most of the time it seems to me that I am inattentive when I identify myself with fear or some kind of problem," she said at last. "And I don't have the energy to accept information. I can repeat it, but then I won't remember." After listening to the student, the sage nodded. "So, there is also a lack of connection to the emotional center. If a person does something without emotions, thinks about something else, then he will forget everything and will be distracted. And if our emotions are turned on, then they lead us in the right direction. Therefore, we need to tune in emotionally, and then there will be a good concentration of attention." "And how do we do it? Also through images?" "Yes, that is right. We need to imagine that we are doing something, what it will give us, why it is necessary, how it will help other people, and how it will help us develop ourselves. If we see all this, and at least some small emotion awakens in us, then we will be attentive, and it is easier for us to stay concentrated. And if we do something without emotion, reluctantly, just because someone told us to do it, then naturally, everything will be forgotten. The mind will be distracted by something else. It will constantly be led in the opposite direction. Therefore, if you feel that there is no attention, tune in. Do what you need with little, yet positive emotions." The woman's face brightened and filled with inspiration. Now she clearly saw how to cope with a problem that was troubling her, and the light in her soul shone with renewed vigor Meanwhile, the hand of a tall, muscular man went up. "Teacher, I understand that emotional involvement is associated with awareness," he began in a low, deep voice. "When there are positive emotions, we remember everything, perform actions better, and overcome laziness. That is, we become aware of ourselves. And what about negative emotions? I noticed that when they are raging, I seem to be more unconscious, and it's difficult for me to keep control of myself." "Yes, indeed it is," confirmed the keeper of the knowledge. "Negative emotions lead to a loss of awareness. Spite, resentment, aggression, anger. When we succumb to them and forget about everything else, then real hell begins. Complete identification with a lie is an unconscious mechanical state. Complete destruction. If we talk about the level of society, then when negative emotions prevail in it, wars, conflicts, persecution, jihad, and witch hunts begin. This is very dangerous, and we need to keep an eye on it. But if our positive emotions win, then it is much easier for us to be aware." "Doesn't awareness come primarily from the mind?" Dana asked in surprise, adjusting the thin metal frame of the round glasses on her nose. "If we are conscious only from the mind, but there are no normal sublime emotions, we will not have enough energy, and we will constantly forget ourselves," the sage explained. "And if we have a lot of sublime emotions when we contemplate beauty, listen to spiritual music and pray, then we accumulate positive impressions that help us to be aware." Dana nodded gratefully, satisfied with the keeper's explanation. The conversation about emotions tuned everyone into a certain frequency of vibrations. The students' inspired faces expressed that it was in the here and now that they experienced the highest joy from the proximity of the teacher, from the opportunity to absorb the truth. The sage embraced all of them with his gaze and spoke again. His words formed into poetic stanzas. "Magnificent mountains, majestic expanse, toward the vague firmament expands my bold glance. My life undulates like the waves of the sea, and radiant thoughts fly away pure and free. Beneath the vast heavens reign freedom and light, and nebulous clouds continue their flight, and winds will dispel them once and for all. The day will be over and darkness will fall. Above in the heavens the moon starts to shine. Its miraculous glow is calm and divine. This taciturn star will protect me and bless, and drift like a boat in the world's timelessness." The voice of the keeper intertwined with the barely perceptible noise of the wind, and flew with it over the majestic expanse of the plain in a vibrating elastic wave. It seemed that he wanted to embrace the whole world, reach out to the farthest corners of the globe to bring the knowledge to people and give them the energy of creation, acceptance, and love. We invite you to join spiritual seminars, workshops, and retreats hosted by the Leader Masters. Reveal your superpowers, find your predestination, and accumulate power to gain well-being and bring your goals to life. Send an email saying, "I want to join the seminar" to our mailbox, and we will give you all the information. See you soon.